All right. So thank you for joining me today for redesigning job descriptions. Some of our objectives today are to talk about some of the things that we can do with job descriptions to make them impactful. And we think about this through the lens of human capital management. Some of the things that job descriptions can serve as goes far beyond just a way to get people to apply to your organization. This comes directly from the job description redesign toolkit. These are just some of the things that a really strong job description is capable of. We're talking about a job description as a communication tool, a way to establish role relationships, support compliance, of course, work on hiring and communicating your HR branding. But I also want us to think about a really strong job description as a way to improve employee performance management as well. So when we talk about a job description being a tool for performance management, it's an opportunity to bring somebody into the organization who's new to the organization with a really clear-cut understanding of what the expectations of the role are, and also use that on an ongoing basis for each annual review, looking at that job description, referencing that job description as part of an annual performance review. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to conduct a job analysis, the importance of a position overview, how to write job duties and essential functions. We're going to just barely touch on competencies, and then we'll talk about best practices. So let's dive into job analysis. Our first little to-do list here today is how to conduct a job analysis interview. And then if you were going to go through this process, we don't want to just use the same old job description we've been using for years on end. We'll conduct a job analysis interview. We'll draft a skeleton job description without even looking at the existing job description. Then we'll compare it to the existing job description in order to fill in some gaps. Discuss those revisions with the position supervisor or a hiring supervisor, depending on kind of what the scenario is in your HR departments. And then we can present that shiny new job description to staff. So job descriptions can be redesigned for existing staff as a way to help them succeed in their roles and grow in their roles. And they can also be designed to help with hiring and bringing new people into the organization. So there's your to-do list. And let's talk about what a job analysis actually looks like. So I don't know if you've seen Office Space, but they say, what would you say you do here? And that's what a job analysis aims to answer, focusing on aligning that role to your strategic plan and your human capital management system. You may be familiar with the expertise effect. Someone within your organization is promoted to a new position, but because they're already so good at what they were doing, they're irreplaceable. So now not only are they doing a slew of new tasks, but they're still doing the things associated with that old position as well. And that happens so frequently in school districts when the pace is really fast. And that expert takes on a new role, and now suddenly we're rewarding somebody for doing good work with more work, and we lose track of what each individual position is supposed to be. And so a job analysis helps us answer that question, tease out those things. What is this role actually comprised of? And you can begin to see what tasks should or should not be associated with that position, as opposed to which tasks are associated to an individual, okay? Here is one way of conducting a job analysis. There are lots of different ways that you can go about it. My favorite way is to start by writing a user story. So as whatever persona I am, I want this outcome so that we can accomplish this thing. So if you were to write a user story, it might sound like this. As a student services director, I want to hire a software technician so that our data entry and record systems can be more efficient. As an HR director, I want to expand my team so that we can support higher enrollment numbers. As a principal, I want to bring on an instructional coach so that we can provide more targeted professional development. these kinds of things. And so this is actually a tool from Scrum training and Agile software development teams, where a user story is this sort of informal, natural language description of the features of a software system. And since we're looking to improve systems of our own, the human capital management system, this is a perfect crossover for use in designing a job description. So by starting with this user story, you can kind of kick off your job analysis. A little bit more on a job analysis. Like I said, when we were kind of looking at those side-by-side job descriptions, it's important that we don't just get in this habit of continually recycling the same job description, because these subtleties exist and they change over time. By recycling that same kind of tired job description, we also get stuck in this trap of current state, where a job description actually can serve to be a vision of the future state. So it's an opportunity to turn that into a list of tasks, not just that have been done, but you can create this total picture of what you would like for the role to look like, because we're now looking at job descriptions as a tool for performance management and workforce planning. Especially if we're redesigning a job description for a vacant position that we're going to start hiring for, this is the time to imagine what you want that to be, the future state of the role, as opposed to just hurriedly reposting that same job description and then trying to later help that person who you just hired understand the nuances of what the role really will be. And this is another opportunity during a job analysis to evaluate compensation. So once you have redesigned that job description and thought through all of the different tasks and duties and skill sets that are associated with that role, it's also a great time to ask that question: is this the appropriate salary range for this role? Doing this is going to help you save time in recruitment too, because you'll ensure that you're bringing in the right types of candidates, that your candidate pool is appropriately expecting what this role is going to be comprised of from a salary component. Another suggestion I would like to make is to involve your team when you're doing this. Supervisors, especially when they are over a larger team, are not necessarily experts on every individual role. And that's not to say that the supervisor is disconnected in any way. It's just that they're not necessarily in the trenches carrying out those job tasks on a regular basis. And so when those supervisors are looking at a job description, they might say, okay, yes, this passes muster, but without talking to people on the team, without talking to people who have operated in that role before, they might not know some of the subtleties or nuances that make up that role. So when you talk to your team, like let's say you're just bringing on somebody to an existing team, you can talk to the other members of that team, kind of find out, almost like in a stay interview, what are the pain points? What are the areas where there are inefficiencies? What are the things that, multiple people are doing a small piece of that maybe one person could be doing the entirety of? Questions like that, teasing out that kind of information from the people who are closest to the role, can be really valuable for a supervisor or for an HR department to understand prior to putting out that job description into the wild. Another good question to ask is, what is it that makes up your 80%? And we know that no job description is going to be a perfectly exhaustive list of every single thing that's expected of somebody in a position, right? Like, there's just no way to always cover 100%. And if you did, it would be like a mile-long job description that nobody would want to actually adhere to. So think of it as the 80%. What takes up 80% of this person's time? And those are really the things that you'll want to associate to competencies. So if a huge chunk of time is spent working in spreadsheets and working with numbers, you'll want to hire for competencies that are appropriate for that amount of work. If really like spreadsheets and numbers are a tiny little sliver of the work, maybe it's something that you want to add on the job description, but it's not necessarily something that you're going to really focus on when you're designing that whole story of what the job is. You can also ask people, what is it that you currently do that's outside of your job description? Because that can really inform some of the things that a supervisor may not really want that person to be doing if it's outside of their job description. So it's a good time to reevaluate that job description. Or it can be a great time to say, oh, you know what, this is outside of your job description, but maybe it fits better in this role. So we're kind of looking at this more holistically and thinking about this job description as a performance management tool, not just for the individual, but for the overall system of that team, or kind of wherever that role fits within the broader organization. great Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. And that's one of the hardest parts of job analysis, is really focusing on the position and the role instead of the person. And I think this is such a common trap that we fall into, because we have to zero in on the functions of the system instead of the person. We have to detach from some of those complexities that just come along with human beings. And all the more reason why relying on data-driven processes instead of sentiment will help us fine-tune some of those components of our organization. So in short, this first kind of chunk of job description redesign is job analysis. It's redesigning the direction of your efforts, or rethinking the directions of your efforts toward making a job description a tool that looks forward and becomes much more than just a task list. All right, so let's talk about a position overview. So I'm going to read you a position overview and you tell me if it sounds exciting or not. This position will liaise between his or her assignees and ubiquitous junk food vendors, hold and/or carry belongings that are suddenly deemed too heavy, monitor locations of bathrooms and their admission lines at all times, and ensure proper disposal of waste. Additionally, this role will provide financial support when called upon during character visits and collect the photo passes that assignees may very well die without. What a bummer description of the happiest place on earth. If somebody taking a kid to Disneyland for the first time read this job description, kind of kills the joy, doesn't it? It doesn't exactly pique my interest. I don't want to carry stuff and throw away trash all day. This is an example of a position overview that I think misses an opportunity for inspiration where inspiration could abound, right? And so a position overview, because it's right there at the top of your job description, is such an important component of grabbing the right candidate's attention. So while I don't think you need to write in some like super fluffy inspirational stuff, I do think that you can look at the unique opportunities that any given position will present and allow your candidate pool to see past the task list and into an opportunity that might be really inspiring for them, or something that they're really perhaps excited about applying for. So let's look at one that's a little more applicable than Disneyland. This one is actually for a school. This position acts as a liaison between the Child Nutrition Office and the school cafeterias to provide financial and technical support. The CNP accountant will provide training on use of time and attendance software, monitoring web-based work order systems, and preparing financial and statistical reports. So it's a position overview, but some of these things can go down in the job description in the duties and responsibilities. So let's look at a redesign position overview and see if it sounds any better. When it comes to meeting the needs of our students, nutrition is paramount. So you're giving a purpose drive right there. The Child Nutrition Program Specialist provides financial, technical, and record-keeping support necessary for food service programs across the district to function smoothly and ensure each student has access to timely, high-quality meals. You've added a purpose to this position. So the types of people who are purpose-driven and in education, so many of us are, we're certainly not driven by the paychecks. This gives people an opportunity to look past the task list and see, I can contribute. My effort, my skill set isn't just this boring clerical work order systems reporting role. I'm contributing to child nutrition. I'm contributing to students being able to learn because they have eaten, right? And so suddenly your mindset changes just from that position description. So we want to keep these short, 1 to 3 sentences, because again, you're going to be putting a bunch of stuff down in the job description that will describe what the role is and what tasks associated to the role will be. So you don't need to worry about listing that up there. You'll have space in the document for that. This is a purpose statement, not a reiteration. You're going to talk about what they can accomplish in this. Okay, so let's look into job duties and essential functions. This was like our family's favorite movie growing up, and so I can quote basically all of The Princess Bride. And one of my favorite lines is when the grandfather says, yes, yes, you're very smart, shut up. And it's because the reason I put this in here is because sometimes on job descriptions, we kind of get in our heads about it, right? Like we don't want to rely too heavily on the other duties as assigned, which is great. It's an important best practice, and we'll talk about that at some point. But we tend to use all of our brilliance in this job description, and that academic language can be gatekeeping, this unintentional outcome by us putting all this like really fancy sounding stuff might be eliminating our opportunity to bring people into the candidate pool because we're using language that's not necessarily succinct or clear. It's not the time to test our vocabularies. It's not the time to bust out the thesaurus, unless it is that you're hiring somebody whose primary objective is going to be thesaurus based. These should be succinct bullet points, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in best practices. But keep in mind that the job description, again, is not a time to make sure that you sound super smart and very verbose. We want to make it accessible, okay? Now, job duties and essential functions. And the operative word here is essential. We're talking about eliminating minor tasks and tasks that are not unique to this role. It's a performance management tool. It's not a replacement for the manager. So if this is going to be a performance management tool, this is something that's going to be interactive, almost more like a living document, not in that it changes, but in that it is built into that role and the management of that role. So we're not aiming for comprehensive here. We have the knowledge, skills, and abilities section to spell out more specific functions. And we're really, again, looking at that 80% kind of majority of what it is that this role, what is expected of this role. You can also really focus on listing these things in the order of importance or of schedule demand. So if it's some role that really has like one primary function, go ahead and put that first, just by nature of human beings. As we read through a bulleted list, the things that are further down in the list are going to stick out less to us than the things at the top of the list. So put your priorities at the top of that bulleted list in key duties. Another important thing to remember is action statements. And so what I mean by verb plus result or verb plus method, we could say something like support instructional planning by leveraging research-based practices. That's one bullet point, and you've told this person that they are in a support role. You've told them that there's instructional planning that they're going to be involved in. And you're going to tell them that you're looking for somebody who knows something about research, how to use research-based practices. So that's one super effective bullet point, as opposed to listing 3 different things and losing their attention along the way. So if you think of this formula as a verb plus a result or a method, let me get the next one up. There we go. Guide teachers in developing content and unpacking standards to improve accuracy and impact of lesson delivery. This could be a really impactful bullet point because we're talking about guiding teachers. So that already communicates that they're sort of in this position where they're coming alongside of a teacher or guiding a teacher in a certain direction. They're going to be developing content and unpacking standards. So those are probably competencies that they need to have. And what is the outcome? You want somebody who can effectively improve the accuracy and impact of a lesson, right? Okay, let's look at one more. Design, document, and implement new networks, modify existing networks. Okay, so this one is really, really succinct, right? But you're doing it still in one bullet point. You're saving yourself some space and some words because we want the most impact per square inch of that job description document, because you often only have the attention of a new candidate for a short period of time. You want to make sure every square inch of that thing is making the most impact possible. Focus on outcomes or expected results, and where appropriate, use an active voice as opposed to a passive voice. So let's touch on competencies. Competencies is going to be, I was going to say could be its own, but it is going to be its own virtual seminar, because training on competencies and how to hire for competencies is such an impactful way to approach interviews and data-driven hiring practices and multiple data point hiring. So I'm going to really just kind of skim the surface of competencies, but I really think that it's one of the most critical components for aligning a job description with your human capital management system. So we can talk about what the practical implications of these things are. A competency is sort of defined as an intrinsic trait as opposed to a learned skill or ability. So a competency is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, acting. And when considered in a hiring situation, competencies can be used to select and sort of evaluate candidates and develop them into or determine who's going to fit well into this role. But then once you have those competencies in mind and really well established, they can also be used to promote and develop teachers and principals and leaders and everybody else within the system as well. Identifying the competencies that you want in that role will strengthen your job description. And then with that strong job description going into the whole hiring and selection and placement process becomes much more effective as well. So in looking at some of these competencies, I wanted to give a few examples and what they might look like. So if you determine that a competency that you're searching for in any given role is team leadership, that might look like assuming authoritative leadership of a group for the benefit of the organization. And if you have that in mind while you're looking at resumes and while you're doing data-driven hiring processes and multiple data point interview processes, you're looking for people who have, whether formally or informally, often informally, assumed leadership of a group, and you're able to ask questions in order to determine how that competency serves them. Another competency is called initiative and persistence. You can certainly come up with your own, but there are a couple of organizations who've done a really good job of collecting and defining what some of these competencies might be. So if you're looking for somebody with initiative and persistence, that could be defined as the drive and actions to do more than is expected or required in order to accomplish a challenging task. Now, you might not have somebody apply for a job and say, I have initiative and persistence, but you might be able to see evidence of that through their work. So how do we measure these things? If there are 3 to 5 predetermined competencies built into every job description, then going into the interview, you can create a rubric that measures these things during your hiring process. And again, I'll share the public impact opportunity culture initiatives work on this. And we have had the opportunity to use this over many different hiring cycles, both internally and with school districts. And it is continually proving to be a really beneficial practice in hiring. All right, so looking at these again, I just wanted to, I know I kind of teased these earlier, but visually, looking at these 2 job descriptions, one of them is pretty immediately more appealing, right? The way that it is visually designed. You're looking at a job summary that's shorter. It's not reiterating some of the essential duties. You're looking at visual elements that make it really easy for a candidate to determine whether or not they possess the minimum and preferred education and experience. You're looking for knowledge, skills, and abilities, as opposed to some of these kind of redundant, sort of visually unappealing, uninspiring bulleted points. Also pointing out on the original version how the bullet points aren't all aligned. They're just these little components of designing a job description for maximum impact that if you're looking for people with attention to detail, especially, they're going to notice, oh, those bullet points aren't aligned. It seems like nothing, but if you're looking for somebody who has attention to detail, that's going to be the kind of thing that they notice. Let's fly through some best practices and then we can chat a little bit. Tidy a little a day and you'll be tidying forever. The reason I bring that up is that it's important to overhaul the job description for one job description at a time or one department at a time. We can't just tidy them up when we want to use them because we sort of lose track of the impact of those job descriptions in the recruitment and hiring process and in the performance management process. So if you really sit down with it, and I know it can feel cumbersome, but when you sit down with it, start with a clean slate and design the future of that role, you're doing your future self a favor. Let's look at a couple more best practices. Standardizing the job description template, adding a footer with the last data modification. That way, when you need to go hire for a position, if you notice that it hasn't been updated in 4, 5, 6, 10 years, then it's time to revamp that job description before you send it out. Checking for ADA compliance and disparate impact. There are things that as we learn more about best practices in hiring and as we learn more about the populations of people who are trying to attract to work in our school districts, we want to make sure that our job descriptions are accurately representing the priorities of the district or of the school. Another best practice, involve current employees in the process. Learn from them what it's like to be in their role, because no supervisor, no HR director can know perfectly all of the complexities of a person's role. And then keep bias in check. Identify data points that you're looking for in resumes. Monitor for tone. There are words like support and collaborate tend to have a different tone attached to them than words like drive and initiate, right? So look for all of these things. Try to take a step back when you're looking at a job description and pretend like you know nothing else about the organization. A couple more best practices. It should fit on 2 pages. It should be clean and easily digestible, because if a job description goes beyond 2 pages, you're gonna lose at least some of your candidates' attention. I think inside the box for a job title, I think maybe this is like less tempting now, but there was a period of time when you could not look at job descriptions without seeing the words ninja or rock star or the effort was to be, fun and creative about what those roles are. But when you're searching for them in an online database, you're not actually looking to hire a ninja. You're looking to hire a teacher. You're not really looking for a rock star. You might want to call your math coach a rock star, but it needs to say math coach in the job title so that people can find it. Another best practice, avoid jargon and acronym alphabet soup. Keep in mind that these people don't know your organization in many cases. They may not know what those acronyms stand for. And so you lose the opportunity to be very descriptive when you're just jumbling up letters that they're not going to understand. Make a really strong distinction between preferred and required, especially when you're talking about years of experience. So if you're going to say 3 years required, 5 years preferred, great. If you say 5 years required, 5 years preferred, it doesn't really make sense, right? And make sure when you're looking at the preferred and required levels of historical, like if you're saying that they need to have been at a certain level or had a certain certificate or degree or whatever, make sure that those preferred and required sections are very clear. Including an employer value proposition, that's going to be another one of our HCMS virtual seminars this year, writing a strong employer value proposition. And then, of course, throw in that perform other duties as assigned. Just don't let that take up any of the sort of mental space of what you really want that job description to communicate. So I have flown through a super high level guide of what job description redesign can do. I'm going to go back to this slide, just kind of give you the side by side to see the impact of a physically redesigned job description. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this job description redesign session was helpful. I will be sending out some resources, and you can also find these same resources in the Learning Library. You can search job description, you can search job description redesign, or you can just search for HCMS and you'll be able to find all of these resources.